and welcome to our weekly Facebook Live update. We do this every Monday morning at 9:15, give you a weekly HR update with a particular focus, of course, on COVID and the things you need to be aware of in respect of that, the developing aspects of our managing the pandemic. But in addition to that, we've got all sorts of updates for you in terms of HR as well, which we're delighted to bring to you this morning. So for those who don't know me, I'm Bronwyn Pearson from Pinnacle People Solutions, and our company provides human resource services, advice, support, solutions, strategies, you name it, to regionally based small to medium-sized enterprises and not-for-profit organisations. We are here to help you and your business, not only through these challenging COVID-19 times, of course, but all the time. So please ask any questions that you might have as we go along. Good morning to those who are joining us and spreading the good mornings this morning. Delightful to have you with us. Please ask any questions that you might have as we go along, and we will do our best to answer those. Outside of this, of course, you can contact our team anytime via Facebook, email or telephone. The details are in the comments. And if you want more information about any of the stories or the information we're going to be sharing with you this morning, don't hesitate to get in touch or ask away in the comments for this morning. So let's have a look at breaking news and changes since last Monday. So the great news is that as of this morning, Australia recorded no local cases at all from yesterday, Sunday, for the first time in almost 5 months. Very exciting. The Health Minister, Greg Hunt, has said he believes Australia remains on track to have all of its internal borders open by Christmas, allowing Victorians and those from Sydney to travel freely. So we think that's great that he thinks things are on track. So let's watch this space as we count down the next 8 weeks to Christmas. So it's been, of course, with that record of no local cases on Sunday, another glorious donut day for Victoria this morning. Congratulations to our Victorian colleagues with 0 new cases reported this morning and no new deaths from COVID-19. So this is the 3rd day in a row that Victoria has recorded no new cases. So well done to you guys. You've had an enormous challenge with the consequences we know of the lockdown, and we're just so glad for you that the situation is as it is. The 14-day rolling case average for metropolitan Melbourne has dropped to 1.9, while regional Victoria has not recorded any new cases in the last 2 weeks. So let's hear it for our Victorian colleagues, and especially, of course, our regional colleagues in Victoria. So for details of the current restrictions in New South Wales, you can visit the New South Wales Government website, and we will pop the link up in the comments for you. There's been no substantive changes to restrictions in New South Wales since last Monday's update. There was, however, very happy to see a return to normality at the Sydney Opera House over the weekend as audiences returned to their seats for the venue's reopening for live events. And on Sunday, so yesterday, there was a tribute to the life of jazz legend Don Burrows, which kicked things off. And there was a socially distanced audience enjoying that one-off performance. And the season will begin in earnest tonight with the Sydney Theatre Company's Rules for Living, which will play at the Drama Theatre until the 19th of December. And tours of the Opera House will also recommence this Thursday. So that's great to see. A bit of normality coming back to our Sydney CBD. Okay, so of course over the weekend too, we heard of the re-election of the Queensland Labor government and the Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk. So she has announced in the last week that the state's borders will open to most of New South Wales, but not everyone will be allowed in. But the good news for those of us working in rural and regional New South Wales is that as of 1 a.m. on the 3rd of November, so that's tomorrow, 1 a.m. tomorrow, Queensland is set to open to New South Wales, but it will be still closed to Greater Sydney and Victoria due to concerns about lingering community transmission in southern states. but residents living in regional New South Wales will soon be able to enter Queensland. You will still need to apply for a border pass to travel into Queensland. And Queenslanders will also be able to travel to regional New South Wales from tomorrow without having to enter hotel quarantine upon return. So that is great news. That is fantastic news. So one of the questions we've had about the changes with Queensland's border is, will I need to apply for a border pass? As I just mentioned then, yes. And if you're a Queenslander, you will still need to complete a border declaration pass to re-enter the state after you visited regional New South Wales. Anyone from regional New South Wales will also need a border pass to travel into Queensland. Border passes will be updated from tomorrow, tomorrow. So expect that to happen today. You'll need to show authorities that you haven't visited a coronavirus hotspot within the last 14 days on your border pass. Passes will now last for 14 days rather than for a week, which is great. And another question we've had, thank you to our people who are tuning in. What if I need to travel via Sydney? Good news is that the Chief Health Officer has said Queenslanders who want to visit regional New South Wales can still travel there via Sydney Airport. So, but they will need to travel through Sydney without stopping in Sydney to get to those areas outside those 32 local government areas in Sydney that have been identified as still restricted to the border. And any Queenslanders will need to travel by car, not by public transport, through Sydney without stopping until they get to their destination outside of the coronavirus hotspots. Residents in regional New South Wales who've spent some time in Sydney or a hotspot area will not be able to enter Queensland. Good news for those of us in rural and regional New South Wales also is, can I quarantine in a regional area? And the answer to that is yes. So if people from Sydney are wanting to, people in other regional areas, as long as you haven't been in a coronavirus hotspot in the last 14 days, you are able to enter Queensland. And that means residents living in Sydney hotspot areas could travel to regional New South Wales and quarantine there for 14 days before entering Queensland. You'll still need to fill out, of course, a border declaration pass. If you haven't visited a hotspot in the last 14 days, you don't have to quarantine. Can I do a day drive back and forth without restrictions? Yes, you can come in and out of Queensland as you wish, but you'll still need to fill out a border declaration pass to get through the checkpoint. And of course, police have warned us, and we're passing this on, about heavy traffic likely on the 3rd of November when restrictions do ease. People can also drive up from regional New South Wales to Queensland via Sydney as long as they don't stop in Sydney. So what does this mean for Christmas, which is less than 8 weeks away now? Whether hotspot residents are going to be able to reunite with loved ones over the Christmas period really does remain up in the air at this point. The Queensland government have said that they will make further announcements on the state's borders at the end of November. So it's going to be some weeks away before we hear what's happening from Queensland perspective. Don't despair though. The Chief Medical Officer has said that there's a strong possibility Queensland could open to Greater Sydney over Christmas if New South Wales continues to keep on top of the virus. So let's all continue to be COVID safe. And obviously there's also, they're also keeping an eye on Victoria's case numbers as the state gradually reopens after a month's long lockdown. So talking about our southern colleagues in Victoria, for all the details of changing restrictions in the regions and in Melbourne, which came into effect as at 11:59 p.m. last Tuesday, the 27th of October, we'll put a link in the comments for both the Melbourne restrictions and the regions restrictions. There's been great news about restrictions continuing to be lifted in Metro as well as in the regions from Tuesday, the 7th of October to stage 3. And that's been from going from stay at home to stay safe, which is sensational. So we're obviously all hoping for borders to be reopened in time for Christmas. And assuming that that does happen, just a word of caution, we all need to be very cautious about hygiene and social distancing over the Christmas period so we don't have another spike in cases come January 2021. And just a reminder, if at any time, if you have any COVID-19 symptoms, sore throat, shortness of breath, fever, any of those things, get tested. All right. So, developments in the last week, some interesting developments and pieces of news and research and so forth that you might find helpful. So our Federal Industrial Relations Minister, Christian Porter, is urging companies to bring their staff back to the office now as quickly as possible as the country moves into a COVID normal state, borders reopen and the economy begins to recover. But global research commissioned by Australian software giant Atlassian has shown that Australians rate their working from home experience much more positively than their global counterparts. The research, which has been recently released, found that Australian workers were more polarised than other countries, with 43% preferring to work completely from home, 30% preferring to work completely at the office, and 27% choosing a mixture of both. National Australia Bank became one of the country's first major employers to encourage its staff to return to the office this past week, telling its 34,000 employees it wanted to unlock the benefits of in-person collaboration again. Big business, of course, has, quite understandably, been cautious about ordering staff back into the workplace, particularly while Melbourne remained under strict lockdown, preferring to leave it up to employees in many instances, or in many instances instructing them to work from home. We've also seen in recent surveys a sharp rise in the share of Sydney employees who want to work remotely in the future. So that begs the question, do employers expecting a smooth post-COVID return to the office have a worker revolt potentially brewing? And one of the employment relations experts at Sydney University's Business School, Professor Ray Cooper, expects, as do a lot of us, that many employees will push back against a full-time return to the office after demonstrating their productivity while working from home. And there is expected to be a good deal of pushback if there's no accommodation of the needs of people for flexibility. And of course, we know that the Fair Work Act and the National Employment Standards actually provide in the legislation for the right to request flexibility to a whole range of groups of employees. So this is going to be a very interesting space for us to watch. The other interesting element to this is that the clearance rates for leasing properties and selling properties in the New England and Northwest region of New South Wales has been unprecedented in recent times. There really appears to be a regional migration happening, and I'm sure there's a lot of people living in a 4x2 apartment in this, in busy areas of Sydney who are going, listen, if I'm working from home, I'd much prefer to work from home with a view out as I'm looking now, out my back window to green and a lovely big open space than somebody's bathroom next door. And this is a real reality that we are really encouraging regionally based employers to get ahead of, because that migration is well and truly happening, and it's been fantastic for regional areas to be on the front foot with that. Really interesting, the research that's happened across COVID. And because what we know is that people's least desirable activities in their daily lives is commuting. It's one of the biggest gripes. And we do know that long daily commutes take a toll on both people's perception of the satisfaction of their lives as well as their family relationships. And there was some very interesting research from Melbourne University academics who surveyed nearly 3,000 Australians in May about how rushed or pressed for time they felt before and during the pandemic. Interestingly, for women, 44% felt rushed or pressed for time before COVID, but that fell to 19% during the pandemic. For men, it was 35% before the pandemic and 21.8% after the pandemic had started. In the normal course of events, what that shows is that getting to and from work and getting family to school and back again is quite a stress, which was largely removed, notwithstanding higher overall workloads and doing more activities at the same time, which was falling obviously on parents and those working from home. Feelings of being rushed broadly fell quite substantially. So very interesting, and we'll keep you up to date on what's happening in terms of research in that area, and also the whole new normals that are emerging in terms of the way work is done. It's going to prove to be very interesting, I think. Okay. In other news, good old convenience store chain 7-Eleven has now paid back $173 million to more than 4,000 victims of endemic wage theft at its franchise network. It is contested, however, by the former Australian Consumer and Competition Commission boss Alan Fels that amount represented only a fraction of the chain's unpaid wages. You might recall that the pay issues, where owners commonly paid workers for only half their hours and forced staff to hand back much of their pay in cash, were first exposed as widespread in a combined Sydney Morning Herald, Age and ABC investigation in 2015. There was a repayment program set up, but it's been suggested that the scheme has actually not paid anywhere near as much as it should. So watch this space. We'll keep you informed about that. One of the Back to Basics webinar series, of course, that we did in this last month for Small Business Month was on knowing how to pay your staff correctly. And trust me, if big employers like the 7-Eleven conglomerate can get it wrong, and so purposefully wrong, imagine how difficult it can be for small businesses. In other employment news, I just want to give everybody another reminder that to all employers, that the minimum wage increased for a second group of awards starting yesterday, the 1st of November. So back in June, the Fair Work Commission announced a 1.75% increase to award wages. It's a long list, so I'm not going to read them all out, but particularly note that in Group 2, which is due to the increases came into effect yesterday, 1st of November, are the Clerks Private Sector Award, the Horticulture Award, Mining Industry Award, and the Pastoral Award. And we know those to be common awards for our clients, which is why I'm mentioning them. But there are others in that Group 2 as well. So get in touch with us if you have any questions. For all the details, including the full list of awards affected, you can see that in our latest newsletter, and we'll give you a link to our latest newsletter. Also, to get updates like this in your inbox as they happen, you can subscribe to our employer circular anytime. So we are keeping people directly updated on what their obligations are. Also in employment news, a reminder that the New South Wales Job Creation Fund, Regional Job Creation Fund, is now open for applications. The focus of the fund is to co-fund projects creating at least 5 sustainable regional jobs. The eligibility criteria are quite wide, so I'd encourage you to visit the website and check out if your business or a project you're thinking of might be eligible for funding. If you don't apply, they can't say yes. So we'll put up that link for you in just a moment also. So that is it from us today for Monday morning update. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, if you have specific questions about your business or you want us to help you out in any way, please contact us via email, Facebook, phone, etc. for an obligation-free chat, and the contact details are there in the chat screen for this morning. After running our Back to Basics webinar series for Small Business Month in October, we will be returning to our regular webinar broadcast this Wednesday, which will feature our consultant psychologist, Jessica Pearson, giving us hints and tips for assertive communication in the workplace. So tell your colleagues and tune in on Wednesday at 5:30 for that fantastic webinar that Jess will be giving to us. In the meantime, please hug the people that you're allowed to and wave cheerily at those that you yet can't. Stay safe, stay socially distant, wash your hands, and we'll really look forward to seeing you for the next webinar on Wednesday. Have a great day.